The interesting thing about a Gorju kata is that almost everything's a variation of the theme. Like a good example, the way to think about this is people say, why did Sanchin kata get changed to closed hands? Is there an open hand version? Well, yes, there is an open hand version. It's all the movements in all the other kata that represent Sanchin. So for example, the good thing about a fist, which people often don't think about, is that it's a very neutral position. In other words, that's my neutral position, and I can add to it in any way I like. So if you think about this as the engine of the power drill, you can put any type of drill bit extension, whatever you want, onto it. But this part, the engine will remain the same. So the thing that immediately strikes us about Sanchin is that we have this position where the wrist tends to be flat in a lot of the movements. Like here, I do that, like when I do that, like when I do that, as opposed to some sort of variation of that. So that's trying to help us understand something about the kata. When I draw my hand back before I thrust it out, imagine you're concentrating on this bit. That's pulling back, and the elbow's going down. So it's just like Sanchin. Same feeling. It's not this. It's this. But keep everything engaged here. Pulling here. This whole line here is pulling. And when I push, I think about the other side. When I thrust, I don't immediately think about my fingers. I think about the other side. As I fully extend, I hit down at the end, and then snap back to that position. Okay, so like in Sanchin, we don't end with a circular movement. We end up with that sort of linear type movement. But that is also just a variation. It can be a variation of this. It can be a variation of that. It can be a variation of that. We want to look at just the movement itself, and then we put it into context of the rest of the kata, and then we put it into combative context, because the basic is just the fundamental. We went like that. The obvious thing is that this osai uke is intercepting, or like anything that's coming in front of me, it's intercepting, sweeping it, and then I push it down. In other words, I clear the obstacle, and then my elbow follows through. So from the most simple way of looking at it, it's just like going block, punch, or press, elbow. Usually a press block because we're in close to the elbow. So that's it when you take the movement by itself. If you look at the movement in context, you see that right before it, you essentially did a kick elbow, another kick elbow. So you do it on both sides. And then it throws in this other elbow here with this sort of pivoting. I think because they come in sequence, you've got to consider that, well, what does this movement have to do with the kick elbow movements? Does it have anything to do with it? So I think that's an interesting thing to consider. We actually made a video about that a while back, and that's on YouTube. So getting back to our fundamental, where you think about something coming at you and you're controlling it, pressing it, suppressing it, and then you're striking after. And then you do this thing where you turn around that way. So whenever we think about application and what we're doing, we should think about different ranges, different combative ranges. So we've got the punching, striking, kicking range. And then we've got the bridging range. Bridging is where I've already come into contact with someone. Maybe I punched and they blocked. So that's like the connector drill type things, or kakiet type things. So you're already in contact. And then you've got the grappling type range. I don't mean laying around on the floor, though it could be. I mean, that's when you're either being suppressed by someone in some way, they're holding on to you, they're wrapping around you, or you're doing the same to them. So essentially we've got those three basic ranges. When I think about this, say in the range where I'm in a grappling range, because we stand-up grappling, then I'm going to think about my hand coming inside, just like in Sanchin. The hand that goes up is on the inside, comes up, is maybe not representing that my own hands need to be crossed. It's just that my hand here, in order for the technique to work, has to have snuck inside my opponent's. That makes sense. So that's going to be the same thing here. You can imagine that if someone's wrapped around you, particularly if it's from the behind here, and you sneak your arm in and then press, you're going to pop that arm off. That's just one example, which means that the turn here and this is going to be some type of throwing. I think it brings us our attention that we want to look at just the movement itself, which we did at the beginning of class, and then we put it into context of the rest of the kata, and then we put it into combative context, because we know there are different, particularly distances of like the combative ranges. Sometimes you can just think of it as, well, what would I do if I was doing this with a boxer? They're probably punching me, or a kickboxer, punch or kick, or a Wing Chun guy, Ip Man, or a wrestler, or a judoka, something like that. I mean, that's a good way to think about your bunkai. Is like, well, the wrestler's probably not. They're going to come in on me and take me down or control me immediately. So my bunkai is going to be different. The strength of our kata, if possible, as much as possible, wants to come based on the principles that we do in Sanchin. That makes sense. So a good example of that is that obviously when I'm doing all these type of movements here, and I'm pulling back, and this is pretty obvious, I'm basically locking this tool to the rest of my body, particularly to my legs and my torso, so that I can have maximum effect when I do that. When I hit it out and push it out, or whatever I'm doing here, I push it out, same thing. I've got the stability here, the shoulder down, everything's connected. And when I bring it back again, that's also important. Sometimes we'll see a nuki there as a way to insert something like under an arm or under a leg, somewhere where it needs to have a narrow profile to get through easily. In other words, if I try and put my fist through my belt, between my belt and my body, it won't go. But if I start with my fingers, I can start sliding it through. So it's just the same idea. I might be able to slide through here. If I slide through under someone, then I pull back, then I'm going to pull them off balance, or if I have their arm at the same time, I'll wrench it. Imagine this hand is behind their elbow, I'll hold their wrist. Pull back that way. It's the opposite of that. And so when I'm thinking about Sanchin, the signature movement of Shifochin, there's two really, but this one really is it. So I go here, these are on the diagonals, and I go to here, and I go that position. So as I'm doing this here, Sanchin tells me when I lift my hand up, when I lift my hands up, I don't lift my elbow up. So I don't want to go like this, because that disconnects here. So when I lift my hand up to catch, my elbow stays down. Lift my hand up to catch, my elbow stays down, my elbow's still in. So when I pull, it tells me also to keep the elbow in. So here, elbow down, this angle, elbow down. So when I pull, when I'm pulling on my opponent, like this is all connected to the rest of my body, my legs, my torso. Just pull back here. So this is how we connect Sanchin to our kata. The angles, like when you look at kata, mostly what they do is, like if you just drew it on a piece of paper, you could draw mostly cardinal directions, what they call subcardinal, and then the diagonal directions. So it's but it's not only for organization, it's also important combatively. Essentially, the beginning part of kata is all forward facing, you go that, and then it's like, I go this up. Well, it's not this, I'm not doing this, I'm not facing that way, and then I go that way, I go this way, then that way. It's like a football player. So you're one way, then the other. Here, and then the next movement, when I come across, the basic application is you put someone's arm, and you're just going to break their elbow from the outside. Here, so as I turn, it's important just to think about the angles, the kata. So I'm going to line myself up exactly 90 degrees to the way I'm facing. So all that's saying is that if I turn here, I've got the arm, I've got to turn through that arm, and I've got to keep looking at the opponent who's now in front of me. Having said that, playing with the timing of the kata can be quite important for your own development. From here, right? So I go 1, 2, 1, 2, and then when I'm here, often what happens is we go like this. We'll go, look at my feet, and then this way. So we can cut down that timing a little bit. I go 1, 2, I literally go 1, 2, then and then go straight to the turn. For example, that would be like playing with the timing, because I'm trying to think about, well, what am I doing in application there? Why am I turning around? Why am I doing that after I do that, for example? Why am I moving the back foot? Why am I moving the back foot in? Why am I moving the front foot in? All these things are relevant to the application. It's telling us something. And then we do it again. We do it again later in the kata on the opposite side, but the rule is the same. Back foot moves in.